CBA stands for cost-benefit analysis, of course. So this is bit of economics actually in this section, cost benefit analysis, but it's what we all do in our head when we're making a decision whether we decide to, buy a can of Coke or we don't. We're weighing up, well, how much is it going to cost me in terms of money and in terms of all the sugar, the damage to my health maybe, and what are the benefits I'm going to get. There's a bit of caffeine in it, I might feel a little bit more awake. We're doing this all the time when we're making decisions. We're just formalising it here for business studies. So cost benefit analysis, first of all, we need to learn some definitions. So private costs are costs to the business or the consumer, as are private benefits. So we're thinking here private cost, the actual cost of the product, actual cost of making it. Benefits, we're thinking the benefit is going to bring the business in terms of profit, revenue, and the benefit is going to bring the customer. And then we have external costs or external benefits. These are called public costs and public benefits, sometimes in the Welsh Board notes. And these are costs to a third party, so anybody who's not been involved in the buying decision or the making decision. So this is, they're not the consumer, they're not the producer. And it's the cost to a third party or benefits to a third party if we're looking at external benefits. And then the social cost is just the full cost of an activity. So you take into account the private costs and the external costs. Social benefits are the private costs and the external benefits. So this question has come up before, and it was with the Severn barrage from Cardiff to Weston before. So I'm not going to read it out to you, but if you want to read through it, you can pause. And it was made by private consortium, Corlin Harfren, I think that's how it's pronounced, but paid for by the government. To build a barrage. And here is the question and the rest of the case study. Consider the issues that will need to be taken into account when undertaking cost-benefit analysis. So it's 10 marks, and you definitely need to know the theoretical pros and cons of cost-benefit analysis, but they've written you a nice long case study, so they want you to pick out some of the benefits and the costs, private and also the external or public. So here we go. I've made a little table. Don't make a table in your exam because it will limit you to the amount of space that you can write in, but maybe plan it out as a table. So the private costs of preventing ships passing beyond the barrage, and perhaps an expensive lock system will be need to be built. So this is going to be incurred by the business. This could also, I'm actually going to copy, well, I'm not going to copy it because I don't actually have space in my table, so that's, demonstrating my point that you shouldn't limit yourself to a space, but that would be an external cost as well to the business, the ship business that can't pass. They might have to go all the way around, or find probably not all the way around looking from that map. They'd have to find a different route, or they'd just not be able to get beyond that point there. So that would, at that part there, would actually be an external cost. Private costs, so the cost of the construction, the private cost to the government of funding it, but the benefits, the company are obviously going to get payment from the government. They're not just doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and the government want it, as in the customer are going to get 5% of energy increase, supply of energy. So it meets their objectives. But environmental costs, we've already mentioned the cost of the ship companies, the environmental costs. We've got cost to local residents. This would only be a short-term cost while it's being built, but it's still a cost. Benefits of economic regeneration, but there we've got a little, evaluative point. It's difficult to quantify. And maybe jobs created, boost the economy, government having to pay out less job seekers allowance, that kind of thing. So when we're looking at this concept of having external costs, there's two good economic phrases that come with this: negative externalities and positive externalities. And just where there are external costs to an action, so somebody else is affected by it. So if you light up a cigarette and you're having a cigarette, obviously there's a private cost to you, so your health and the cost of the cigarette. But there's also a cost, an external cost to someone who's inhaling the passive smoke. So when you get situations like that, like the barrage, you have negative externalities. And if you have positive effects on somebody else, then you have positive externalities. So in my last video I talked about businesses having hand sanitizer by the door, and that's good for you because you might not get sick, but it's also good for other people because they're not going to catch your germs as well. So that's a positive externality. and there's all types of things in economics about why this causes something called market failure. But if you're not studying economics, don't worry about it. Just focus on your business studies. So this is the cost-benefit analysis process. You can pause the slides here to read through this. But the benefits of doing cost-benefit analysis is that it allows the full costs and benefits of an activity to be taken into account, even the external costs and benefits. And it's meant to be a numerical or quantitative approach. So it's really, you don't just, well, you could carry it out first of all to see if the benefits outweigh the costs, because if they don't, you shouldn't do this thing. But you can also compare two different projects as well and see which one is more beneficial than the other. However, there are lots of problems. It's hard to place monetary values on some of these things. So if we go back to this, how do we place monetary values on the destruction of natural wildlife and things like that? And there was, this all comes from the MART scheme, by the way, but there was another point in the MART scheme about accident costs, like, you know, and obviously in the news there's been that awful accident at Alton Towers where the girl has lost a customer has lost part of their leg. So awful, but you know, she'll obviously receive compensation for that, but how do you value a leg? It's really quite difficult to do, put a monetary value on something that doesn't normally have a monetary value. It's also hard to determine a discount factor for long-term projects. So remember when we're doing net present value and you had to discount the value of the money, you know, the benefits coming in the future. It's for projects that are like you do cost benefit analysis for, usually projects which have a lifespan of over, or the investment should last for longer than 20 years. You know, we don't know what the interest rate is going to be like in 20 years, so it's hard to put a reasonable discount factor on long-term projects. And the private sector don't tend to use this. When they're looking at whether to make an investment or not, they're using net present value, they're using average rate of return, they're using payback period, and there are some other methods as well that they can use. But the private sector don't really need to take into account the external costs and benefits unless it's going to actually affect them through bad publicity, which it might, but they're not actually going to have to pay for those external costs. So when you smoke a cigarette, if you do, which you shouldn't, you know, and you're blowing smoke into people's faces and they're inhaling that smoke, you're not paying them, are you? You're not having to really incur the cost yourself of that. So you don't always have to take that into consideration. I mean, they might not be your friend for very much longer, but you're not actually having to pay that external cost. So that's why private sector businesses look at net present value, payback period, discounted cash flow, or average rate of return.